What separates masters from others is often something surprisingly simple. Whenever we learn a skill, we frequently reach a point of frustration. What we are learning seems beyond our capabilities. Giving in to these feelings, we unconsciously quit on ourselves before we actually give up. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 29 of Sports Mastery. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, DeShawn Fontleroy. I know your time is precious, so we're going to get right into today's show. In today's show, we're going to be discussing 8 strategies to mastery. 1, value learning, training, and practice over competition. 2, keep expanding your horizons. 3, revert to a feeling of inferiority. 4, trust the process. 5, move toward resistance and pain. 6, learn to fail forward. Practice to failure. 7, combine the how and the what. And 8, advance through trial and error. 8 strategies to mastery. 1, value learning, training, and practice over competition. I want you to get into a mindset that learning, training, and practice is much more important to the developmental process than competition. And a prime example of that is AAU basketball, youth volleyball, youth soccer, even football to a degree. You have to learn to value learning, training, and practice over competition. And what I mean by that, it's easy to go play 100 AAU games in basketball. It's easy to go play club soccer, get on a select team, and then play your season. And all of these different club sports or teams or all-star teams, travel teams, select teams around your original season or high school sport. The learning part comes into play. If you play a certain, whatever position that it is that you play, you have to learn how to play that position from an offensive and a defensive perspective. You have to learn to play the position from a whiteboard standpoint, learning the X's and O's of the game, learning your responsibility on offense or defense, but more importantly, learning your teammates' responsibility. So then you can make easier adjustments to your opponents. You have to value training. You can't expect to play 100 AAU games over the spring and summer and not have any bodily injuries. You're going to have issues to the low back. You're going to have issues to the knees. You're going to have issues to the ankles because you're playing on a hard surface. And it's not only AAU basketball, it's other club sports such as volleyball and soccer too. If you're going to play, you have to train. One of the things that I can appreciate about certain communities from the Eastern Bloc in terms of Russia and Germany is they're about learning, training, and practice first, and development. This is about mastery. We're not concerned about wins and losses right now. So part of this is about appreciate learning, appreciate training, and value practice over competition right now when you're into the developmental stages of your sport and where you are in time and space as far as your age, not only your physiological age, but also your training age. If you've only been lifting weights for the last 6 months, you have a very, very low training age. Now, when you have 5 years of strength training under your belt before graduating from high school, now we're on the path to mastery. That's telling me something about your commitment level. The second strategy that I'd like to discuss is keep expanding your horizon. That goes back to number 1. It's about learning. You have to learn how to carry yourself on the field. You have to learn how to carry yourself off the field. So you always want to keep expanding your horizons to the degree that you're learning more about the game. You have to learn. And what are ways that you can do this? You have to have a coach or a mentor for you to expand your horizons. You have to have someone that you can talk to. You have to have somebody that you can trust, but also this individual should be an individual that you know believes in you, that sees success out of you, and that is going to challenge you. The only way to expand your horizons is to think in such a way that you want to get better on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, and year-to-year basis. So in terms of expanding your horizons, you have to put yourself in a position to learn more about your sport. You have to put yourself in a position to get more out of your practice time. You have to put yourself in a position to where you can benefit more from your training time. So when you expand your horizons and when you start to see some success, that's letting me know that you're setting day-to-day, week-to-week, and month-to-month goals. It's not always about the long-term goal. We have to be practical and realistic and move towards that long-term goal and break these things down into chunks to get to where we want to be. Number 3, revert to a feeling of inferiority. So what do I mean by that? Revert to a feeling of inferiority. Whether you're in an academic setting or an athletic setting, my advice to you on this, and this is definitely one of my favorite strategies, you have to find an individual or a group of people that are much better than you. And you have to train with them, you have to practice with them, you have to study with them. This could be an individual in the classroom. Maybe you're an average student. Maybe you sit in the middle. Maybe you sit towards the back. But I would encourage you to get past your feelings of inferiority by studying with the individuals that make straight A's, studying with the individuals that are 4.0 students, and listening to them while you're in study groups. You will get more out of that than just hanging with the individual that wants to share information and copy homework and turn it in. That is not going to get you to college. So what I want you to do is put yourself in a position athletically where you're probably going to have to go outside of your community and definitely your team to find athletes that are better than you, where you can train with them on the field and off the field. When I say off the field, that's in training environments, whether it's doing the sprint work or you're doing your strength training. And it can also extend to film and study sessions. You have to get around people that understand, maybe who are physically stronger than you, and maybe even to the degree that they're more mentally tougher than you. But I can promise you, if you put yourself in an intense, competitive training environment and you're around individuals like that all of the time, you're putting yourself in a position to succeed, not only in sport, but also in life, because these principles definitely apply to the classroom and also the boardroom. Number 4, trust the process. You have to remember, let's take the 7th grader, for example, the 7th grader that might be 6'2" right now playing basketball. As I said before, you can tear your body up over the 3 or 4 years in high school playing AAU basketball every year and just doing that alone. What happens is you have athletes that can get on these different select teams, get on these different all-star teams, and essentially you're being used and whored, WHORED, for that team or organization to bring light to them. When what the concern should really be is about loving you as a person, loving you as an individual, and respecting and caring for your mom and dad and taking great care of you. And the only way that you can really do that for a 7th or 8th grader that happens to be a phenom or have some type of label attached to them like that is you have to learn the game, you have to learn how to train, and you have to learn how to practice accordingly. You have to learn how to practice smart. You have to learn how to practice diligently. It's too much to put that kind of a pressure on a 6th or 7th grade athlete this early in the game at 12 or 13 years old, playing 100 to 150 games a year on these all-star or select teams. When you're in a situation like that, it is clear that that organization does not care one stink about you. It's about preparing your body and mind, because you're not going to get anywhere without having the mental capacity at some point to go through the NCAA clearinghouse and do really well on your SAT exam or your ACT exam. And it's also about learning now about what to do with yourself in your life after sport, finding opportunities right now, seeing what it is that you like. Are you great at math? Do you have a propensity towards building things? Do you have a propensity towards playing with electricity or doing your science projects? Because when you're good at things like that, I can see talent right there early and often. So if you're a parent or coach listening to this, you have to get beyond the athletics while these kids are young and find other inborn talents and things that they have natural dispositions towards or subjects. So you can help them enhance that for when the ball stops bouncing, or when the crowd stops, or when there's no longer a time when we're going to get a chance to kick the soccer ball. So part of this trusting the process is you have to do what you have to do on a day-to-day basis, but it goes back to goal setting, because we have to find what is our end goal. If it's high school, most athletes want to play Division I athletics. Once athletes get to college, some of them aspire to go pro. Now, when you look at the academic side, some of us are pushing for academic excellence to get all of our college paid for. And then once we get to school, it's about landing that job, that dream job, or starting our business after school, or getting the primetime internship that we would love. This process is day to day. You can't always look at the end of the road. And what happens is when athletes look down too far down the tunnel, we get distracted because we're not focused on the day-to-day activities that we need to work on, or we often get frustrated. And sometimes frustration is a sign of progress. You have to put yourself, it's okay to be in positions to where you fail or where you lose in a practice setting, because at the end of the day, it's well documented that we want to fail forward. We want to learn from our mistakes. We want to learn from our early failures. We want to learn from our early errors. So you have to trust the process. It's not about right now. We're preparing for the future. The fifth strategy, number 5, move toward resistance and pain. And I've talked about this in a prior and I've talked about this and I've discussed this in a prior episode, suffering. You have to be willing at some point to practice more. It's not that you have to practice 7 days a week for 8 hours a day. If you can practice 7 days a week and at times put in 45 solid minutes to what you're doing, 45 intense minutes where you're not distracted, you're going to get more out of that. You're going to get more out of that than a 3-hour practice with you only being attentive for about 25 to 30 minutes of that. So I need you move toward resistance and pain. So that means in your practices, maybe you practice more. You start to practice more, and you start to practice with more intensity. In the classroom, it's the same thing. If you're learning a foreign language such as Spanish or Chinese, maybe we need to start practicing that more. Maybe we need to work with our tutor more, listen to the tutorials more. It doesn't always have to be longer. It just has to be more and with consistency. Number 6, practice and learn to failure. And part of this, when I say practice and learn to failure, that means you can learn everything you can about a particular subject. That means you can learn everything you can about a particular sport. You can practice, you can train, you can do all your strength training. And at times you can get in competition and come up short and just wonder, what the F just happened? I put in all this work and I still failed. Sometimes life is just like that, where you have to keep at it, take a step back, learn what you can from that particular experience, and then move on. But it's about learning from each of our experiences. So that's what I mean. And you've heard me talk about this in a recent episode where we went out to Las Vegas for a 7-on-7 pylon tournament, and we played 4 games and lost all 4. The next week, or the next tournament after that, we won 3 games and lost 2 and came up short on going to the championship by 1 game. But we learned a lot from that Las Vegas trip and the intensity that we were around. So within that learning experience, we went out there. We trained leading up to that. We watched film leading up to that. We had our sprint work leading up to that. And we also had our practices leading up to that. And we still went out there and failed. That's okay. We put in an effort. It could have been a lot better. But one thing we know, we were distracted. And then our commitment level wasn't as high as we all know that it could have been. So we learn from that. So you have to learn from your failures and learn from your mistakes on the road to mastery. 7, at some point you have to combine the how and the what. I'll give you, for instance, playing receiver. You have to learn how to run routes, and you have to know how to catch the ball. But then at a certain point, you got to learn how to adjust your route based on a particular coverage or the way the defensive back is playing you. So your quick slant, it might be different versus a man coverage. It's going to adjust versus a cover 2. It's going to adjust versus a cover 4, depending on where the linebackers are in space. So it's not only knowing how, you know the routes, you know the footwork. Now you got to know what to do in particular situations. And that goes back to what I was talking about in number 6. You have to practice these things to failure. That's the only way that you're going to learn. And if you get upset when you make a mistake, if you get upset if you make a bad read or you run into a coverage that you've never seen, or the defense rolls into a coverage and confuses you and the quarterback based on the route that you ran, that's a learning experience. You should love that. You should accept that. So this is what I mean by combining the how and the what. You learn how to do something. Now is what do you do when you're in particular situations? And then how do you adjust to that? Number 8, as you can see, these are all tying in, practicing or training yourself to failure, combining the how and the what. And this number 8 is you have to advance through trial and error. It's plain and simple. Everything that you learn, all the training that you're going to do, all the practicing that you're going to do in many competitions, when it comes time to get onto that big stage, there's still no guarantees that you're going to be successful. The only way you're going to learn is at some point. Now it's time to compete once you have X amount of hours under your belt. And when I'm talking about mastery, we're talking about putting in 10 years of something. We're talking about 10 years or 10,000 hours. When I talk about mastery, I'm talking about 10,000 hours. So how are you going to get to 10,000 hours? That might be practicing something every day for 2 hours and 44 minutes for the next 7 to 8 years. That's how you get to master something. That's something to think about, right? If you're serious about what you want to do and you're telling me you have these goals that you want to play Division I athletics, you want to go to the Olympics, or you want to turn pro in your sport. We're talking about masters. When you make it to the Olympics, you're dealing with masters. When you turn professional, when you look at the professional athlete, you're talking about masters of everything around their sport and game and life. 2 hours and 44 minutes a day for the next 6 to 7 years. And when you look at the road to mastery, you can see certain things have to be dialed in by 5th, 6th, or 7th grade. Especially when we're talking about some sports, you do have to go to college to turn pro. And I'll say this, just because you see certain professionals, it doesn't mean that they're always masters of their sport. Sometimes it might take turning pro, and those guys don't master their situation until the 4th, 5th, or 6th year in. So there's still a learning curve when you get there because there's levels to this. If you thought this was going to be some type of run-of-the-mill garden variety podcast show, you're in the wrong place. We're way past dry facts and dry science. What lies behind the Sports Mastery podcast show is my coaching program. My coaching program is designed to help the athlete reach their hopes and dreams, overcome pains and fears, and bust through all barriers and limitations. It doesn't take a PhD to teach confidence. It doesn't take a PhD to teach motivation. Every now and then, it's going to feel like I'm pulling teeth, but what I'm going to share with you is my high-level systems and strategies that I've used with Olympic-level athletes, Division I athletes, and NFL athletes. You can learn more about my high-level systems and strategies at sportsmastery.com/coaching. Get a free 1-hour complimentary consult. Visit that page and fill out the form.